As some of you know, I'm a rather voracious consumer of audiobooks, and I know I'm still got a little echo going on here, but I'm sure they'll get it upstairs for me in a minute. And recently I've been engaged in a lecture by a physicist named Dr. Don Lincoln, who is an atheist, but he's very well known and renowned in the area of nuclear physics. And it's really got me to thinking about a few things. And so I'm going to digress a little bit from our usual plan this morning and hopefully not bore you too much with the science of it, but I have a few things that have just been playing over and over in my mind, and I just wanted to share them with you. So you'll just have to be patient with me, and if it gets too tedious for you, just take a nap. You all know Friedrich Nietzsche, those of you who are familiar with philosophers, and back in 1883, he published a paper that stated that God is dead, and it made headlines, and there was a lot of hoopla about it. And then somebody came up with a sign where in 1900, the year Nietzsche died, they have a statement that God says Nietzsche is dead, and I guess God got the last word on it. I just wanted to kind of introduce this with a reading from Job 12. This is, science in many ways has made so much in the way of new discovery and in further understanding what we know about the world we live in, the natural world. And this is written, I'm not sure exactly when, but at least 4,000 years ago, right, David? I mean, we're back at least to the time of Abraham, maybe before Abraham. I'm not sure when Job lived, and neither is anybody else, to tell you the truth. There's a lot of different conjecture, but this is old, very old. And Job says, ask the animals, and they will teach you, or the birds of the air, and they will tell you, or speak to the earth, and it will teach you, or let the fish of the sea inform you. Which of all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? We'll look later on at a passage from Romans 12:1, where Paul kind of says the same thing. But in between that, we wanted to look a little bit this morning at some of science. But before I get to that, I just wanted to, and this is kind of rehashing things that we've talked about before, but just to kind of put some things in perspective. I'm always interested in the big picture, as you know, and the big picture today, in the year of our Lord, 2023, is that there is a worldwide explosion of religion, of religious faith. And I use the term religious faith in its broad term, not just Christian. However, Christianity is the fastest growing religion in the world. That explosion of Christianity is being led by the charismatic movement, as we've talked about in the past. The Pentecostals especially are gaining new adherents, new members at a phenomenal, unprecedented rate in the history of the world. Christianity is larger today than it's ever been, and it's expanding perhaps faster than it ever has. That's not true here in America, as we know. There's a strong promotional movement among self-proclaimed atheists, especially in the industrialized West, and nowhere more so than in America. There is a group of atheism that has become very, I'll use the word evangelistic in the sense that they are trying to make converts to to atheism. For most times, in most places, atheists are just atheists. They're not out. They may argue with you, but they're not trying to convert you. But that's not true today. There's an evangelistic attitude among a small subset of atheists in the world today who are pushing their agenda very hard. And they're doing it in the schools and they're doing it in the governments. And it's most prominent here in North America. They've already been very successful in much of Europe. And now in the last few decades, they've really brought it to America. And when I talk about atheists, of course, the evangelistic group is that group of atheists that says there is no God. But there are other groups that, in the broad category of atheism, have to be included, and that includes those that would be self-proclaimed agnostics, who would say, I don't know if there's a God or not. There might be, there might not be. I'm still struggling. I'm still seeking. And then there's that group that we're now calling nuns, and this is kind of new in the vocabulary, but that's that group of people that have left Christianity and have left other faiths and just say, I don't want anything to do with anything. I don't know if there's a God or not. I don't care. Not interested. Don't want to know. So those are the broad categories of that. Now, I'm going to get a little bit tedious on you, and I'm not trying to turn you into physicists, and I don't expect you to understand this, and I want you to know up front that I don't understand it, but I know what other people understand and what other people have told me, and most of this is from the book that I mentioned. As I read this book, I didn't read it, I listened to it. It's a lecture, it's a 12-hour lecture. I listened to a 12-hour lecture on the theory of discovering, determining, creating the theory of everything, a quest to explain reality. That's the objective of the physicist, okay? I'm going to explain everything about everything from a scientific perspective. That's the goal. In this particular lecture, this book attempts to do that up to the point of saying, hey, we're not there yet. We still have to go deeper into our understanding to ever get to that theory. As I was reading it, and the reason that I'm wasting your time sharing this is because as I read it, I kept coming back to this core basis upon which we come to a belief in God. Now, this isn't about Christianity. Christianity has an element of faith. We know that, right? But it's hard for me not to believe in God. And these are the three of the real core concepts that make the existence of God so overwhelming in my mind. The idea of intelligent design, the idea of cause and effect, and the idea of irreducible complexity. So the psalmist David would say in Psalms 14:1, only fools say in their hearts there is no God. They are corrupt and their actions are evil, no one of them does good. And as I lay out the contents, a very layman overview of the contents of this work that I've just finished with, I keep coming back to this. How do you know this? How do you present this and deny intelligent design, cause and effect, and irreducible complexity? Because what you're fixing to see is more complex than anything you've ever imagined. Now, we've talked about irreducible complexity in the biological realm a number of times, and there's so many examples of that we could spend the next 10 years talking about them. We're going to look at it a little bit in the world of the physicist. You know what that is, of course. That's an atom, right? It's not a good representation of an atom at all. This was one of the early attempts of scientists to present the atom in very simple layman terms. It doesn't represent what an atom actually looks like. But I put it up here because, number one, you see that there's the electron, proton, and the neutron, and the neutron and the proton go together to form a nucleus. If that really did represent the atom, which at one time people thought it did, what would be the biggest component of that thing? It would be empty space, right? I mean, 99% of an atom in this model is nothing. And everything's made up of atoms. So if that were actually what it looked like, when you took hold of your arm, your fingers would just pass through it. It would just be empty space. That's not true, of course. We know that. This is a real layman's look at the makeup of everything. We have matter, which is made up of either cells or, well, if it's living matter, anything that's living is made up of cells. Incidentally, the cell is probably the most complex thing in all of nature. Irreducibly complex. If it's not living, then it begins at the molecular level, the molecule. But all things have molecules that are made up of atoms. The atoms have within them a nucleus. The neutron and the proton of that nucleus is made up of quarks. And most of science has come to accept that there is something smaller than a quark. They don't know what it is yet. One of the common things that they think may be right is what we talked about before, is the string theory. It's a theory, but something makes up the quark. They've got to get to a lower level to be able to reconcile the law of thermodynamics and the laws that seem to be governing or need to be governing the quantum world. This is the makeup of the Higgs boson. The Higgs boson was just recently discovered, but the Higgs boson is what creates matter. That's why that when you touch something, your hand doesn't go through it. It has substance to it. The Higgs boson works with the quarks and the natural forces and the leptons to create matter. But look at how many different quarks have already been identified. There's the up quark, the down quark, the charm quark, the top and the bottom quark, and there's one quark that's so weird that the physicists simply call it the strange quark. Sometimes physicists come up with whimsical names for their things. Leptons break down into 6 different categories. Then we have the different forces that act upon them. The boson, the photon, the West boson, and the gluon. Is that complex? Everything is made up of a combination of the way that these things work and assemble and come together and break apart and change and modify. How do we know all this stuff? Well, this is one of the underground colliders, happens to be in Geneva. It's called the Large Hadron Collider. These things are built underground and they're miles long, and they create streams of these nuclear particles, and they have receptors in there that, based on how they collide with each other and expand and break apart, they can identify characteristics of them. How many of you remember back 30 years ago when Waco was building a collider? You remember that? I was manager over at Sears in Port Arthur at the time. They started that up in Waco. They've got about 12 miles of tunnel underneath Waco that were going to be the world's largest collider. They stopped it. And it's unfortunate, but they did. But it had a budget of about $4.5 billion, and it was supposed to be an international affair. The international community didn't do their part, and the budget had ballooned to like $8 billion, and we were trying to get the space station up in space. So I guess basically they decided they had to do one or the other, and the space station won. So now we got a big 12-mile hole underground up in Waco that would have been one of these colliders. But it was in this particular collider that a guy named Peter Higgs discovered the boson, the Higgs boson that we just mentioned earlier. There are 5 known forces in the quantum physics, and all of these have an effect on how these quarks interact together to form the atoms that go together to make up the molecules that go together to make up you and me. Gravity, matter and energy. Gravity is what holds us to the ground, what guides the planets. We don't know what gravity is. Einstein said that it's a matter of, it's a case of matter, substance, and energy that's being bent in space. If you've got that figured out, come and tell me. Electromagnetism, it was a major step forward when they connected magnetism with electricity, and that's a major contributing factor. The strong nuclear force binds protons and neutrons together in the nucleus of atoms. The weak force, responsible for some of the forms of radioactivity, and then the Higgs boson, the Higgs field, that gives mass to subatomic particles. Is that complex? It all happened accidentally, you know. There was no cause. There's no intelligent design in any of it. Here are some of the factors that influence quarks. Some of them have positive charge, some have negative charge, some of them don't have any charge at all. That combination of factors determines everything that they do. They have spin. They have left hand, right hand, up, down, and different degrees of spin. Some spin is a quarter turn, some is a three-quarter turn, some goes left-handed, some goes right-handed. They have velocity. Velocity is the interconnection of mass and inertia limited by the speed of light. How fast do they move? They have a decaying time and the direction of decay, and that changes the identity of the subject. You've heard of carbon dating. That comes back to the decay of quarks. They have flavor, and like I said, they sometimes use whimsical terms in physiology. They have 6 different flavors for quarks and 6 for leptons, used in particle physics to indicate things that are similar yet distinct. Similar yet distinct. That's exciting. They have energy, matter, and antimatter. And there are quarks and there are antiquarks. And there's energy and there's anti-energy. And there's symmetry. And symmetry is a thing that can be changed and nobody would notice the difference. If you have a symmetrical face, you look the same whether the photograph shows you from the left or from the right. All of these things go to make up how a quark acts. Totally accidental. No design. No irreducible complexity. No cause other than accident. Some of the things that science cannot explain. This isn't from the lecture, by the way. He wouldn't talk about this. Can't explain light. Is it a wave? Is it a particle? Or is it both? Or is it one sometimes and one and something else another time? Can't explain gravity. I know a lot of work's been done on gravity, all the way back to Galileo, Newton, Einstein. We know that gravity affects time. We don't know if it has quantum qualities or not. When I say we, I don't mean me. I mean the scientific world. Don't get me wrong. We can't explain magnetism caused by the motion of electric charges of atoms, but we don't know how or why. We can't explain time. We know that time is not always constant. It's even altered by the relationship that it has with the speed of light. The closer an object gets to the speed of light, the slower time passes. dark matter and dark energy are extremely complex ideas, but they have to exist for the physical world to make sense to a physicist. He had to have something to account for all of that space out there. So they came up with the idea of dark matter and dark energy. And by their calculations, dark energy is about 70% of the mass energy of the universe. Ordinary matter, that's you and me and the world we live on and the stars we see, all of that combined makes up 5% of the universe's ordinary matter. And then the dark matter makes up the final 25%. Dark energy is the largest energy component of the universe, and we know very little about it. So I come back to cause and effect, irreducible complexity, and intelligent design. The scientists that figured out all of this cannot accept any of those three core principles. He is bound to account for it by accident, without any intelligence behind it. In conclusion, my conclusion, the faith needed to deny the existence of an intelligent designer who is the ultimate cause for every physical effect and who controls the irreducible complexity of the universe is far greater than the faith needed to accept his existence. It seems to me that the physicist has a really, really tall mountain to climb. So why do they have to so stubbornly cling to that premise? Well, this is from the lecture that I've been referencing. Any hypothesis to be accepted by science must be empirically confirmed by repeatable, confirming experiment and tangible demonstration. You have to be able to show it in a test tube, in a collider, before they can accept it. And I'll conclude with this from Romans 1, 18 and 20. And Paul says, the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth by their wickedness, since what may be known about God is what? Plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. I have a song. And this is a song that was recorded by Praise and Harmony. It was done right here, right where I'm standing, a few years back. It's on the album Wonderful God. It was a Christmas album, but this is on it also. But before I do it, is there anyone who would like to add or subtract or elucidate or challenge anything that I've had to share with you this morning?
This certainly gives you a greater appreciation for when God worked the 6 days of everything he created to these very infinitesimal details that he went through, and why he would consider it important that he worked and then he rested.
Yeah. Anybody else? All right. You'll see several of our members in this, by the way. All right. Well, thank you for allowing me to, I don't know if you allowed me to or not. I just did it anyway, didn't I? Thank you for sitting through that dissertation, but it was something that had been on my heart for a while. So, to our text, Matthew 12. Make a tree good, and its fruit will be good, or make a tree bad, and its fruit will be bad, for a tree is known by its fruit. Can't argue with that. Jesus is just a master at metaphor. He just, the things that he chooses to use to describe his principles and his ideas are just so vivid and so clear and so easily understood, and that it's just remarkable. You brood of vipers. That's pretty clear. How can you who are evil say anything good? For out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. The good man brings good things out of his good store of treasure, and the evil man brings evil things out of his evil store of treasure. But I tell you that everyone will give an account on the day of judgment for every careless, idle, empty, depending on your translation, word they have spoken. For by your words you will be acquitted or justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Would you agree with me that in our current culture in this country, the language has taken a pretty significant move toward the spectrum of the rotten fruit? How many of you saw Gone with the Wind when it came out? It's been a few years ago. You remember the big wow moment that made all the conversation and the news about that? There was one sentence in that movie when Rhett Butler said, frankly, Scarlett, I don't give a damn. And everybody went, I think there may have been some boycotting. I'm not sure. I think there probably was. That wouldn't even make G rating today. You can't watch the news. You can't watch any TV programming, any movie, without being bombarded with words that I didn't even know when I was growing up. I don't know. I don't know what you do about it. I mean, you can't isolate yourself from it. But I think you have to realize that those things have a way of permeating your thoughts and your thinking, and you have to guard against that. Every idle word on the day of judgment will be given account. I don't even pretend to know what is going to happen in the eschatology when Jesus comes again. And I don't know how to interpret all the passages of Scripture that we have about eschatology. And whatever you have in your mind for that is at least as good as mine, maybe better, and it's certainly right for you. So I have nothing to try to convince you of or persuade you about. But I have a theory. And this is just me. Every knee will bow, every tongue will confess on the day of judgment. That's a lot of people. That's more than a dozen. In my mind, the way I imagine this, and I know that my imagining is wrong because none of us know, and we're all going to be surprised. But in my mind, the way I reconcile this for me personally is, I think Judgment Day occurs the day you die. You move out of the realm of time into the realm of eternity, whatever eternity is, which we can't even comprehend. And I think that's when judgment happens. And I believe that every knee bowing and every tongue confessing is maybe illustrated by the phenomenon that we talked about a few years ago when we were doing Thin Places, Heaven Reimagined. You remember as we talked about those near-death experiences that one of the common threads that run through all of them, and there's even a phrase that you grew up with, my life passed in front of my eyes. I thought I was going to die, my life passed in front. There's a very real experience in these near-death experiences of people having a life review where they actually experience their idle words, their actions, their deeds. And the way they describe it, almost without exception, is that they felt how the other person felt as a result of what they did. There was an accounting, a time of accountability. The other thing that they said, almost without exception, is that they did not feel a condemnation or a rebuke out of it. It was something they needed to experience, that they did experience, that they couldn't avoid. But when it was done, it was done. Now, is that what Jesus is talking about? I don't know. But it's one way for me in my own thinking to rationalize a literal interpretation of giving an account. But it's not the idea that, and we talked about this a little bit last week, it's not the idea that you spend eternity based on your last sin or your last inability to ask for forgiveness. And I like the idea that, yes, we do give an account. Yes, we do experience our actions and our words when we stand before God. But it's not an eternal thing, and it's not a matter of life or death in Christ, in God, but it is an accountability. Who can quote Romans 8:1 for me? What does it say? Somebody. There is therefore now, what? What? No condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. For the Spirit of God has freed us from the spirit of death. And that's the way I think about this when I think about every idle word. Otherwise, none of us would have a chance, right? All right. Mark 3:21. When his family heard about this, they went to take charge of him, for they said, he's out of his mind. We started last week back in Mark 3:20. Jesus is surrounded by all of these people, and he's so busy that he and his disciples don't even have time to eat. And his mother and brothers send word to him to come out and talk to them. Well, that's going to happen next. But right now, what we've done, because we're using this interlinear compilation of F. LaGard Smith. So he starts with Mark 3:20, and then he jumps over into the text that we've had here in Matthew, and now he jumps back to Mark 3:20. So all of these things that we've been talking about is what Jesus was talking about to that crowd at that time, and now his family comes to take charge of him, and they see that he is not taking time to eat. He's not taking time to take care of himself the way they think he ought to, and so their conclusion is, the guy's crazy. He's out of his mind. A little bit, he go see his mother and his brothers come and send word for him to come out and talk to them. If people aren't calling you crazy, maybe you're not thinking big enough. Maybe you're not dreaming big enough. Sometimes a little crazy is a good thing. Of course, it depends on what you're crazy about. But isn't it interesting that Jesus' brethren thought he was out of his mind? And some of the scribes and Pharisees said to him, "Teacher, we want to see a sign from you." And Jesus replied, "A wicked and adulterous generation demands a sign, but none will be given it except the sign of the prophet Jonah." What was the sign of the prophet Jonah? 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish. Whereas Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. There are so many passages where Jesus talks about 3 days and 3 nights. And and we've talked about this in times past, and I'm not going to belabor it today, but it does give me pause about Good Friday being the day on which Jesus died. It just, mathematically, I can't get 3 days and 3 nights out of that. I think that he died earlier than that. I think he was in the earth exactly 3 days and exactly 3 nights, because Jesus always completely and accurately and totally fulfilled prophecy. One of the cornerstones of his justification for presenting himself as the anointed one to the Jewish people was that he completely and accurately fulfilled all of the Jewish prophecy concerning the coming anointed one. But it's in the common vernacular, and if you accept that Jesus died on Friday, you can still go to heaven. Good news. You'll just be wrong, that's all. And then Nineveh will stand up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, for they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and now one greater than Jonah is here. The queen of the south, or the queen of Sheba, will rise at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, for she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and now one greater than Solomon is here. This would have been pretty jarring words for those Pharisees and scribes and rabbis that Jesus was speaking to. To hold him up before them as greater than Solomon, that would not have sat very well with them at all. I wonder what the men of Nineveh would have to say about our generation. I wonder what the men of Sodom and Gomorrah would have to say about our generation. When an unclean spirit comes out of a man, it passes through arid places, seeking rest, and does not find it. Then it says, I will return to the house I left. On its return, it will find the house vacant, swept clean, and put in order. So when it comes back and finds the house vacant, swept clean, and put in order, what's it going to do? Going to bring some buddies with him. Yeah. Then it goes and brings with it 7 other spirits, more wicked than itself. And they go in and dwell there. And the final plight of that man is worse than the first. So will it be with this wicked generation. How many spirits does it bring with it? Whole bunch. 7's not a number, it's an idea, it's a concept. There'll be a bunch of them. As he was speaking, a woman in the crowd yelled out, God bless your mother, the womb from which you came, and the breasts that nursed you. And Jesus replied, but even more. He doesn't deny blessing his mother. He says more than that. Blessed are all who hear the word of God and put it into practice. Well, our time's just about up, so we're gonna come to a conclusion there, and we thank all of you who are with us online this morning. Appreciate your presence, and thank you for your patience with me this morning. And those of you who were not in first service, you're in for a real treat. I think this is one of the most powerful sermons that Rick has preached at Southeast. Have a wonderful God bless week.